All right, so several of you haven't submitted your assignments yet for project 2, which should have been like super simple. And I think this is partially Udacity's fault because they're saying, oh, well, it's very important to have a design portfolio and all this other nonsense. And one, it's actually not. I don't have a website up at all. But that doesn't stop me from getting jobs or getting job calls because I have something called GitHub, which as a developer, that's your primary focus. You're not really going to be building resumes or anything like that by hand. It can be nice, but most people aren't going to care. To be flat out and honest about it, because they'll just assume you're going to be using some sort of pre-built system anyway. So it's much more important to have a good GitHub than it is to have a good resume. But second, a lot of you are like trying to find work or posting up stuff, and all that was unnecessary. This should have been done in a few hours. So I'll walk you through that. And the key to being able to deliver software is to understand the concept of the minimum viable product. The minimum viable product means delivering what is asked for and nothing else. There's other acronyms like YAGNI, you ain't going to need it, which just means like you end up building a lot of stuff that you end up not needing. And every line of code that you add is a line of code that has to be maintained. It's a line of code that can introduce a bug. So you always want to actually add as little as possible to get the job done. So here, presenting this with some sort of a client demand. Whenever we get into it, here's the product specifications. There should be at least 4 images. There should be title text like H1s, H2s, paragraph text, and a logo. Use semantic elements. No div or section text out of CSS class or ID. Learn about structural elements. Okay. Custom design. Provide at least one of the following. Custom images and text. Custom placement of the images on the page with HTML, CSS, or both. Or customize the CSS styled at minimum to paragraph and heading elements. Okay, and page utilizes a grid-based layout with styles, making use of Flexbox or a framework like Bootstrap framework, etc. Okay, and then if we go into responsiveness, make sure that you can use the device simulation. No content should be hidden. There's a viewport meta tag, and that we have responsive images, and then the rest is just making sure we break up stuff correctly. Okay, what do we actually build? Well, what they give you is pretty much this. And this is the HTML version of that with my name and a few other little differences going on there. So what is this minimum viable product? Well, when we go up here, we use, let's look at this in the markdown, this special little tag right here, and that basically tells it to enable it to create these little checkboxes you can check or uncheck. And so if you check them and then you look at right, if you do this, put a space, now you have an empty tag, put the X in, you now have a checked mark. So that's what you have to do. And you can notice there's not a lot here that you actually need to have done. So there shouldn't be too much going on here. So we look at our main page. It says to use a grid-based layout. Flexbox is actually the opposite of a grid-based layout in most ways, because there you just specify the number of columns you want, and you let the Flexbox containers figure out how it's actually going to do that, as opposed to like Bootstrap, where you're constantly saying, okay, make this a medium 3-column layout, make this a 6-column layout. It's based upon a 12-column layout. And 12 columns are used because 12 is divisible by 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. So everything except for 5. So because it's so easy to divide into multiple sections, people tend to use 12-column layouts. But anyway, it's kind of weird to have both Flexbox and a grid-based layout. So the compromise here was to do this, which instead of letting it fit the entire page width, I put a max width on there. And that basically says, on this wrapper here, that basically says don't let it go to anything above 1000 pixels. This also has a nice benefit. You'll see that if I throw that back on there. So as I like resize things, they resize responsively. And the max width just tells to go back to normal content flow after that period, or after it gets less than this. So anyway, most of the stuff I covered in the previous video. So we have our root variables, which inside of the little layout picture they give you here, they give you 3 colors of blue and this black. I don't actually know why they gave me this color here, because they only use 2 colors. This bluish gray, I told you that font designers tend to create their own blacks and whites. This is an example of that. And then this sort of grayish blue that they have going on right here. So this color isn't used except for on the logo, but the logo is just an image. So I don't, bad designer, bad. So we only have those two colors really to deal with. This one could be commented out, we wouldn't lose anything. There it is inside of PyCharm. We got a wrapper with this max width. We got our HTML body. We define all these colors as this special black instead of true black. The default is Railway. The default body font should usually be a sans serif font, so we got that going on. A lot of the stuff inside this design here is uppercased. Here, all this stuff. So we're creating a dedicated class that's going to deal with that. Just make sure everything's text transformed. And if later on down the line we don't like that, we can just remove that class from the elements. We got some of these elements that are much bigger than the others. So this looks roughly twice the size as this. Somewhere in that region, 2 to 3 times. So we have stylings applied to that. And then we got these super big fonts down here. We could just let the H1s and H2s take care of that, but it's generally a bad idea. You want a little more customization than that. And then we got our flex container. Only thing fancy going on is this flex 33, which just says to space things out 33% apart. So that gets these 3 items right there together. I'm pretty sure I could probably even eliminate that and it would probably still work. Let's try it out. Right, so we go here and flex 1 and 33. Yep, so Flexbox is smart to figure that sort of stuff out. That's why it's the opposite of a grid-based layout. Anyway, so there you go, free tip. So then we got a width of 100, and that's just because we want to, I think that's on these things. Yeah, it's actually on the height. And that's because without that, see how the heights are a little bit different between these different images? We want to make sure they all kind of line up. So there's a height setting on that. There's a horizontal line. This is probably the other big thing that's fancy. That's this right here. And the only gotcha with this is that you need to make sure you have the background as well, because you can see how there's that little thin white line space. So we got rid of that. But throwing the background with the same color. We got a float, so I don't generally like floats very much, particularly once you move to flex boxes. But in some cases it does work perfectly fine, and here's an example of that. So this is floated to the left, these two are floated to the right. So here we go. We got this whole thing wrapped in a header that has a clear fix applied to it, which that just gets rid of. There we go. It's what's known as a pseudo element. I don't know if that was ever covered, but pseudo elements are non-selectable in JavaScript. So if you have a CSS pseudo selector or pseudo element, there's no way in JavaScript to manipulate that. It has to be manipulated with CSS. So they can be kind of a gotcha. But that just clears out the floats is the main thing. You can see what happens if you don't clear out the floats. Everything stays inside of that broken DOM flow. So we have that going on. Same thing there. And same thing there. So this just simply adds a fake element and immediately clears the fix. So that way all the elements are back to normal DOM flow. We got that little gray thing going on there. And then the only other weirdness going on here is this. I actually hate how they did this. And that is they tried to kind of line it up there, and I don't like that style of design. So just to show you why. So basically you got to kind of like point twiddle, and then you got to decide like, okay, do I want to line it up to this, or do I want to line it up to that, or do I throw another wrapper inside of my other wrapper and use that wrapper to wrap this and to wrap the size of all this other stuff? You end up having to make choices like that I don't like to make. So generally, how would I do this? None of that. I would say font align center. Nope. There's a text align. There we go. Yeah, like this. And I would make that a lot bigger because saying this is the feature work and then having in this tiny little section over here, that's kind of weird to me. So this would probably be something like, oh, font size for rim. There we go. That's my feature work. There we go. Now that says I'm really proud of it. That's too big. That's almost parody. But something maybe 2.5. There we go. Something like that. And this is too low contrast against that, so this would be a good place for the color of var light blue. There we go. So now it has a little more contrast and we actually get to use that color. So that's probably what I would have done as a designer to sort of separate these elements from each other, but who cares, right? This is the minimum viable product. Don't do more than you're supposed to do. So then we got that out. We did it in 114 lines of CSS and 61 lines of HTML code. The only thing it's really missing here is missing the viewport little taggy. I'll have to go look that up to go throw it in there, but that's pretty much it. As far as the rest of the stuff goes, that met the minimum viable products, and then you can ship this and submit it. So you should not have taken a huge amount of time on this particular issue. It looks like a lot of you are over-engineering it. You're doing a ton of stuff that isn't being asked for, and the result of that is that you're submitting it, and then like, oh, that breaks this, so now you gotta go fix that. Nope. You want as little as on there as possible, because the less stuff you have, the less stuff that can break, the less likely you already get negative feedback on it. If you do like what you've done so far and you're like, I want to revisit this, then that's where git checkout -b, and generally you can read this as topic or feature or branch. Doesn't really matter, but you put it in some little folder. So topic, revisit for real portfolio, like that, and then we'll git checkout master, and then here you can did something. Here on your main branch, that's the one you would submit to Udacity, and then the other branch, that would be the one where you work on all your fancy stuff. So you should have this done. At this point, you're actually supposed to have the third project done, which is the SQL logs. And this project shouldn't have taken very long. So I think a lot of you looking at it, I wish I could have seen what you guys submitted originally and then seen what the feedback is, but I don't have that capability. I talked to Udacity about it, and apparently that's going to be available for the next group that goes through this. So congrats on being the first space monkeys. But I can't do that. But from what I've seen, a lot of you have done way too much stuff. So always remember the minimum viable product. Always remember that the less you can do, the better. That's why Larry Wall, in his 3 virtues of a programmer, he says laziness is one of them. It is a virtue. The less you do, the less you have to maintain, the less likely it is to break, and the more likely it is to align with what people actually want. All right, so I will see you guys on Thursday or on Saturday. Hopefully, everyone should be on Saturday, but hopefully I'll see some of you on Thursday. Later.